Tampa, Florida. This is Democracy Now! Breaking with Convention. War, peace, and the presidency. We're broadcasting from the Republican National Convention inside and out.
I can't tell you what will happen over the next 4 years, but I can only stand here tonight as a wife and a mother and a grandmother, an American, and make you this solemn commitment. This man will not fail.
Women take center stage at the opening night of the Republican convention just hours after Mitt Romney officially clinches the Republican presidential nomination. We'll hear from his wife, Ann Romney, and Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina. We'll speak to a one-time Romney friend who's now running as a third-party candidate against him, former Salt Lake City Mayor Rocky Anderson. And we'll look at the rising star of the Tea Party, Texas senatorial candidate Ted Cruz.
It's the story of my father, imprisoned and tortured in Cuba, beaten nearly to death. He fled to Texas in 1957, not speaking English, with $100 sewn into his underwear.
Ted Cruz didn't say is that his father was tortured under the U.S.-backed Batista regime. We'll speak with Dallas Morning News reporter Wayne Slater, author of Bush's Brain, How Karl Rove Made George W. Bush Presidential. All that and more coming out. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We are breaking with convention. I'm Amy Goodman. Hurricane Isaac has made landfall in southern Louisiana as it heads towards New Orleans on the 7th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. The Category 1 Isaac is producing winds of 80 miles per hour and is expected to bring heavy flooding. It'll mark the most serious test of New Orleans' rebuilt levees in the 7 years since Hurricane Katrina. At least 200,000 people have lost power throughout the Gulf Coast area, and some 50,000 were slated to evacuate New Orleans. On Tuesday, President Obama warned of the potential of major damage from flooding.
As we prepare for Isaac to hit, I want to encourage all residents of the Gulf Coast to listen to your local officials and follow their directions, including if they tell you to evacuate. We're dealing with a big storm, and there could be significant flooding and other damage across a large area. Now's not the time to tempt fate. Now's not the time to dismiss official warnings. You need to take this seriously.
The United Nations is warning the Palestinian enclave of Gaza will no longer be livable by 2020 unless urgent steps are taken to improve basics, including water supply, power, health, and education. UN humanitarian coordinator Maxwell Gaylord says Gaza's basic infrastructure has been crippled by the U.S.-backed Israeli occupation and blockade.
Action needs to be taken right now on fundamental aspects of life in Gaza: water and sanitation, electricity, education, health, and so on. Action needs to happen now if Gaza is to be a livable place in 2020, and it's already difficult now. Despite their best efforts, the Palestinians in Gaza still need help. They do. They're under blockade, they're under occupation, so they need our help, both politically and practically on the ground in the ways I described.
80% of Gaza residents rely on aid to survive, and many derive their only income from underground trade. Gaza's water needs are dire and only stand to increase, with its water aquifer becoming potentially unusable by 2016. The family of the U.S. peace activist Rachel Corrie says it will appeal an Israeli court's exoneration of Israel's military for her murder. 23-year-old college student Rachel Corrie was crushed to death by an Israeli military bulldozer in Gaza 9 years ago. She was standing in front of a Palestinian home to help prevent its demolition. On Tuesday, an Israeli judge rejected the Corrie family's wrongful death lawsuit, ruling Rachel Corrie's death resulted from, quote, an accident she brought upon herself. Corrie's mother, Cindy Corrie, condemned the verdict.
We are, of course, deeply saddened and deeply troubled by what we heard today from Judge Oded Gershon in the Haifa District Court. I believe that this was a bad day, not only for our family, but a bad day for human rights, for humanity, for the rule of law, and also for the country of Israel. The diplomatic process between the United States and Israel failed us. And today, the Israeli court system demonstrated its failure.
The Corey family says it will appeal the case to Israel's Supreme Court. To see our interview with Rachel Corey's parents, Cindy and Craig, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. The Mexican government has apologized for a shooting by federal police officers that wounded 2 CIA operatives last week. The operatives were driving a U.S. embassy vehicle with diplomatic license plates near Mexico City when they came under fire. 12 Mexican officers have been detained so far. It's unclear if the operatives were deliberately targeted or whether it was a case of mistaken identity. On Tuesday, Mexican President Felipe Calderón apologized to the U.S. government.
I am deeply sorry for the events that took place a couple of days ago in Morelos State. As you know, these events are being deeply investigated with full rigor and severity on behalf of the Attorney General's office in order to separate responsibility in this matter and act in consequence, because we can't allow these things to happen. Whether it is because of negligence, lack of training, lack of trust, or complicity, they can't happen, and they are being completely investigated with full rigor.
The U.S. says the wounded CIA operatives were in Mexico to assist in the fight against drug traffickers. On Tuesday, several Mexican politicians called for an investigation of the CIA's role in Mexico. The first full day of the Republican National Convention kicked off in Tampa Tuesday with the official nomination of Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. House Speaker John Boehner announced the delegate count.
The chair is prepared to announce the results of the roll call. On this vote, the Honorable Mitt Romney of the state of Massachusetts has received 2,061 votes. More than a majority of those votes entitled to be cast at this convention.
Controversy erupted on the convention floor when a dispute broke out over whether to seat the delegates of Congressmember Ron Paul. Part of Maine's delegation stormed off the floor in protest of a decision to strip away half of Paul's delegates. Supportive members of other delegations rose to their feet and hollered their objections, angered by new rules that they say will make it harder for grassroots candidates to stand a chance in future elections. In other news from the RNC, a dozen activists with the group Code Pink were barred from entering a private event Tuesday night featuring former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. The activists were carrying handcuffs in what they called an attempt to arrest Rice for war crimes. Ohio Secretary of State Jon Husted has fired 2 local election officials who voted to extend early voting to weekends in Montgomery County. The 2 officials were suspended earlier this month for extending the voting after Husted, a Republican, announced all counties would follow uniform hours for early voting on weekdays. But since his order only applied during the week, the now fired officials, Tom Ritchie and Dennis Lieberman, moved to expand voting times on the weekend. Critics have said the state's uneven hours benefit white Republicans while disenfranchising people of color. President Obama won Montgomery County in 2004. And a federal court has ruled the Republican-controlled state house in Texas discriminated against people of color in its redrawing of political maps for congressional and legislative districts ahead of the 2012 election. Texas Governor Rick Perry signed off on the redistricting maps last year, but on Tuesday, a 3-judge panel ruled the move violated the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in disenfranchising people of color with a, quote, discriminatory purpose. Texas says it plans to appeal. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. Breaking with Convention. We're in Tampa, Florida, covering the Republican National Convention inside and out.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.